This is an AEG fridge, was brought to me a day or two ago. The owner that owns this fridge took it to some fridge repair place that did some work on it, but it didn't last and it didn't work properly, so he brought it to me. So I've stripped it down and had a look at it. Now this is the electronic board that sits next to the compressor, and there's big pieces of the board burnt away. It's burnt on this side as well. And this is the board that controls the temperature, the on-off, and the self-defrosting and everything. So I've stripped this fridge to many pieces and realized that the fan motor in the freezer, whoever worked on it changed it, but he put a different type of fan in, and this fan that was in this fridge were mounted on the tray that the coil fits into, but he's glued a fan motor against the back wall and just slid the tray, and it didn't quite line up. Now this is the fan motor I took out, and it was stuck with epoxy, and it's a low voltage, and he's cut one wire off, and he's got two wires joined like this, but I couldn't get this fan to run, not with this board. Okay, this is a drip tray that the fridge came with, and I cut this out, but what I've done is I've mounted a normal little Aruki fan motor on here, because the fan that this needs, all it needs is to draw the air in and blow it out there. And with the electronics that control the self-defrosting, and that I'm using a defrost timer. Now if you think logically about the whole system, you got the coil down there that freezes, it blows all the cold air, the fan blows it up into the fridge, and it's got a damper that controls the amount of air. So if I switch the compressor on and off with a thermostat, which is this thermostat bulb, I've already installed the thermostat behind, there's the bulb, this is the coil. There's a defrost element on it that I can switch on and off through a defrost timer. But the most difficult bit of the wiring is the light. Now what I've done in the top here, if you have a look, this is the cover that fits here. The nice thing about this rod that goes through, it connects to this knob, is just a knob that opens and closes your damper for the amount of air. So that's easy. The light bulb, which is there, had on the PC board, there's a device called a lead relay. It's a little switch. There's obviously a magnet in the door. When you close it, this activates it. But what I've done is I've put a little light switch in here, and this is the plug that plugs into the display here. And I've cut two of the wires off here. Luckily at the bottom, next to where the PC board is, there's another plug with exactly the same wires. So I took the two wires, I gave them 220 volts, one of them through the switch and one to the light bulb. So when it gets power and the door pushes on that, it will switch the light off. Temperature in the fridge we can control with this damper that you can rotate there. Compressor at the bottom will be switched off with a thermostat that I put there, and I'll put a defrost timer in, an 8-hour timer. Now the original AEG had all these sensors in it. This little wire was on a switch. I don't know where it is now, but there's a little switch when you close the doors, obviously for the fan, which I'm not going to use. I'm going to make the fan run all the time. These two looks like termination switches or thermal fuses. I'm going to replace it with one of my defrost termination switches, and there was two sensors. I had to cut the one off to get it out. So basically it's just going to be controlled through the thermostat, the timer, the light switch. I haven't completed it, but later on I'll show you what I've done behind. I've put the top cover together now. This is the cover that was off. This is the light switch. So the light switch works now through this switch. When I first put it together, there's no flat surface. This switch is on an angle, slanted. you know, normally there's a flat surface so the switch gets pushed straight, but I couldn't. So when I closed the door, it wouldn't switch it off. So I've just made a little bracket on top of this door here, that there. So when you close the door, that pushes against the light and switches it off. Then in the bottom here, what I've done in the bottom here, this is the cable that comes from your defrost, the element. So I've just cut it and I'll put a defrost termination switch. I'm going to use my own defrost switch. I'll just clip it on somewhere. And these two wires come down. Now there's all these little plugs here that were used for the fan, for the element, and it had a whole lot of other wires. So all I really need is 3 wires to come to the top. The element and the fan motor, so that I can use a common, like a neutral, to the element and to the fan, and 1 wire for defrost for your element and 1 for your fan. So I'll put this tray together and then hang the wires out the back, and then I will show you what I've done behind the fridge and we'll link it up to those. Okay, I've put a drip tray in now. The coil lies in the drip tray. This is the defrost termination switch that I put on just now. These are the 2 wires for the element that I've just linked there. Once this whole thing is up against the roof, I'll test these and then I'll do the connections underneath. The fan's wires are also below. So once I lift it up, I can get in underneath to connect that. The defrost termination switch, I'll just clip it onto this tube somewhere and then just make sure that this fan motor can turn freely. It doesn't obstruct. Now this fan is going to draw air through the coil and blow it out. If you look up in the top of the roof there, there's the channel where the air goes up into the fridge. So the air goes in there to the fridge and it returns back here. There's a hole here and there's one on that side as well. So the air to the fridge goes up and it comes back through these 2 vents. And that's what cools the fridge down, and the amount of air will be determined by that damper. This square hole down here is the drain. When the element comes on and this coil defrosts, the drain will fit in there and it will defrost the water out. So now I'm going to lift this coil up and mount it, and then I'll show you how I connect the wires and what's behind it. I've put this cover in its place now. Now you can see the 2 wires coming out the bottom. This is the fan and this is the defrost. So I'll connect it on there. This is a little cover that fits in here. It goes in here, but the screws that go through here. But I won't assemble that as yet, because when it's on defrost, I just want to move this, then we can feel for defrost and that. So I won't assemble that, just for movement. And then once we've connected the wires here, there's a cover that fits this cover here. This covers everything here. So whatever I do behind here will be covered by this cover. You won't see it. But for now, I'll leave it off and then I'll show you what I do behind. This is the thermostat that comes out the back. I put a little sleeve over it, but on the inside it was just a little coil I made. This is a defrost timer I've put in. Now this is the mains 220 volt cord. What I've done with the cord is, let me unplug it from the time switch. These 2 little thin wires here, I've just linked it up to the cord. That goes right up to the top in the fridge that works your light. That's 220. And I just brought 2 wires out, live and neutral, to connect the other things with. Now what we do is we plug this into our defrost timer. I'll put the live one on contact number 3 and a neutral one on contact number 1. So having 220 volts straight on the timer, the little motor will run continuously. It's got a little motor that turns the timer. Your fridge side is the contact number 4, which I'll take to this thermostat. Now from the other connection of the thermostat, I will run the compressor, and from this I will find 2 wires to run the fan motor. So on this thermostat, once it's running and we can adjust the temperature, we get the freezer side to somewhere around 20 degrees negative Celsius, minus 20, and we can adjust that on the temperature here. And the fridge side we will adjust on the damper to get a temperature between like 2 and 5 degrees. But now I'll have to figure out which of these wires is going to work the fan and the element inside, and I will connect that up just now. I've connected all the wires on now. The fridge is plugged in and running. What I've found is there's little plugs inside, and these two little white wires goes to the one plug. So what I've done with the little white wires, I've connected one onto the live and the other one onto the terminal here for the defrost. So that will give power to your element, and the little yellow wire here goes to your fan motor. I found the yellow, and on this connection the yellow and green goes to another plug. So I've got a live connection here to your compressor, to your fan, and to the defrost element. And then the compressor gets broken. This pink wire is the compressor wire to the thermostat, and this blue is your compressor, yellow fan. So if this thermostat breaks, it will stop the compressor and the fan motor inside, or if it goes on defrost on the timer, it will break the connection to the compressor, but then give power to this little white wire to your element inside for the defrost. Now on the inside, I'll just show you what I've done. These two, it's a little bit dark in here, but these two little wires is the two little thin white wires. That little plug, these two grey wires, goes to your defrost element, and this is your fan motor. You can actually hear the fan running. So if you pull this plug out, the fan stops, and just by pushing it back in again, you get the fan motor to run again. But now all this will be covered by that cover. This thermostat, I'll just make it go up a little bit higher inside there, and the cover will cover this. So I'm just going to run it for about a half an hour now to get the defrost termination switch cold, and then I'll just see if the defrost period is all right. I might have to move the defrost termination switch around a bit, and then we can run it to temperature. I've pulled the coil out just a little bit, just to have a look at the element. There's a thin layer of frost on the coil, and the element's getting hot and it's melting it. So I'll just give it a few minutes, see if it defrosts nicely, all the ice off, and then the defrost termination switch must switch the elements off, because if it stays on too long, there's a lot of plastic to be melted. There's a piece of styrofoam on top there. But now that I've pulled the coil out like this, the drain at the back has come out, so I'll push it back before I squirt the water in there. I've put all the covers together, so this, you just get the light, it's very dark in here. I've put the top cover together. There's the little switch, which gets pushed in by the door, but it won't do anything. The back cover is in, so you can't see any wires behind it or the thermostat sensor. And there's the top, it's all assembled. So I'm going to run it now. I'm going to run it overnight, and in the morning I will just adjust the temperatures to get to the correct temperature. I've completed the fridge now. There's the fridge temperature. It's Celsius 4.5 and minus 18 in the freezer. This hovers between about 2.9 and 6 degrees. And I've assembled the whole inside. It's working, and at the bottom all the covers are together, and behind the fridge I've mounted the thermostat on a little bracket there, and the timer is behind it, and I've neatened the wires up again. So now this AEG fridge is completed, and we can give it to the customer, and there's no electronics in the operating system.